So this is for those who criticize me for say that I only listen to stories of men that are unhappy with the fact that they got preputially amputated or circumcised. Um, this is from Bohemian Guest on choosingcircumcision.org. I would have liked to see the skin swelling. I have had issues with the remaining mucosa swelling for several years. In fact, I have my penis recircumcised to try and get the swelling to resolve. It's better today, but I suffered for several years with that problem. Okay, so first of all, this is telling me that he has had medical issues with his prep use. Seems like as long as he can remember. Life would have been so much easier if my mother would have just circumcised me when I was born. Being one of the few in school with a foreskin was not pleasant. So clearly he was bullied or body shamed in school. So he was taught that there was something wrong with him, that it's not a good thing. So he's being he's being indoctrinated or conditioned. And I don't mean anything. I don't mean to shame trans people here, but a lot of people say that people that are trans have it's all in their head or whatever. Well, if you're being body shamed all your life, or think about it. You can be psychologically affected to believe that it's not a good part. And if you're not just psychologically affected, but you've been, say, forcefully retracted as a baby, and you got scar tissue built up on your prepuce all your life, then it's probably not going to feel like it was supposed to feel. When I got married, my wife never said anything about my foreskin, as I kept it retracted. I started when I was 8 years old. Hated the fact that all my friends were circumcised. See, again, why does he hate it? Other than, a whole bunch of foxes without tails, saying that they're the normal ones, because most everyone else is cut too. At 13, it stayed retracted all the time. Okay. That sounds like, in a way, it's circumcised. I mean, that's what they do in the Philippines. They do a cut where they don't actually remove the prepuce, but it stays retracted all the time. It stays down on the shaft. The only time it would be pushed over my glands is when my wife would play with it. I'd like to know what that would be like. She knew about my desire to be circumcised, but said nothing about me having it done. At least his wife wasn't body shaming him. After I had my modified dorsal slit is not a prepuce amputation, but they call, sometimes that's called a circumcision too. I've come across one man that had a dorsal slit to address phimosis, and he thought he was circumcised. See, there's different ways that the word can be used for different kinds of cuts. Female circumcision, female genital cutting, female FGM is set up in 4 different types according to the WHO. There's actually different types of male genital cutting that goes on too, and I can think of 4 types myself. So after I had my modified dorsal slit, I thought I was finally circumcised, but I had remaining a lot of loose skin. Okay, isn't that a good thing, particularly for masturbation? Instead of having to use lubrication. I think I had less bunching of skin behind the corona when I just had my foreskin pulled back. Okay. My wife did not notice any difference after my surgery during sex. I still have most of my original foreskin. It just now sort of all hung at the bottom tip of my penis. I could cover all of my glands just like before my surgery, but now, afterwards, the remaining foreskin would retract on its own and leave most of the glands bare. Okay, so that's the aim of a good surgery that tries to resolve phimosis. You don't actually need to remove the prepuce or all of the prepuce. You don't need to lay bare the glands to address phimosis. To me, I was finally circumcised, what I had dreamed of for so many years. So, okay. So now I guess he's defining circumcised as full glands uncoverage. I did not really know how loose my results were for several years. I just knew that I asked to be circumcised and some of my foreskin was trimmed and my glands would not stay covered anymore. When our son was born, she had him circumcised right away. Doesn't that send a signal? Maybe she did have a problem with having glands covered if she had her son cut. When I looked at his circumcision, I realized that all of his foreskin was removed and not any skin could be pushed up to touch his rim. His circumcision was so different than mine. At that time, looking back at what I saw in the locker rooms, I realized that all the circumcised boys were done the same way. All their foreskin was removed. If they're all in the same town, good chance is that they had the same guy or whoever, the same mutilator, performing the same, using the same tool and performing the same procedure. So, yeah. But he might not have paid attention to nuance, like how much frenular and inner mucosa area is left on different guys. And it's often hard to tell without looking at it erect. She left me a few years later. My second wife's previous husband was not circumcised, so all my loose foreskin was not anything for her to be concerned about. We talked about having me redone, but she did not see any need. I talked with several doctors about redoing my penis, but no one impressed me enough to go back. I lost her after 20 years. We had a good sex life. When I married my third wife, my life and foreskin changed. Her previous husband was circumcised very tightly. She did not know just how to handle my penis with all the loose skin. She never said anything at first, as the glands was usually bare, but as time passed, my glands was being covered more and more. That sounds similar to foreskin restoration, things being stretched out. I would come home and she would find that my foreskin was completely over my glands. She would either reach over and push the skin back or tell me to fix my penis so that it looked normal. Another person that's been conditioned. We found a urologist in Minneapolis who we could trust to remove all of my loose remaining foreskin. I was finally really circumcised. No skin could be pushed over the rim from that day on. My problems then became the remaining mucosa was all swelled up behind the rim. It was like I had a large donut resting behind my glands. This kind of sounds like paraphimosis. The frenulum was now very tight with an erection and pulled the tip down. So, guys that are cut as babies have these sorts of problems too. All depending on how the angle of the bell or the clamp is put on. Swelling lessened over time, but the frenulum breve did not change. She was so much more happy that her husband was now fully circumcised. Shallow, all focus on looks. Does he even know what's going on what the difference is. Paying attention to details about how things work differently. We found 2 years later a urologist in Atlanta, and he removed all traces of my frenulum. I can't imagine. I mean, I'm lucky because I was cut with a clamp and not a Bell method, so I have my frenulum area, and it's clearly important. Yeah. But okay. And in doing so, re-circumcised me and took some more skin from the top side. I again had all the mucosa swelling. It too lessened in a few years, but never completely went away. He removed the frenulum. I just don't get. I mean, frenulum is kind of in the mucosal tissue area, so I'm kind of questioning whether this is real at this point. It too lessened in a few years, but never completely went away. We talked with a well-known urologist in Miami, and he suggested that I undergo a fourth circumcision, and he would try and connect the skin so the lymph fluid would drain properly. See, there's just so much to know about doing it right. How about that? There's a lot more nuance down there than just cutting a loose flap of extra skin. It did work better, but for several years I still had swelling when we would have intercourse. Now, after 10 years, only on rare occasions do I get a little puffiness. My late wife might be the only woman in the world that actually watched her husband get circumcised 3 separate times. She stood right next to the table each time. Today I'm without my very special lady. I miss her every day. My life growing up with a foreskin would have been so much easier had my mother circumcised me when I was born. She was saving me from the pain, but caused a life of frustration. Well, buddy, maybe if your mother knew not to forcefully retract you, and maybe if you wouldn't have given in to the cultural norms, cultural conditioning, maybe you wouldn't have had problems with your prep use in the first place. So yeah, I'd like to hear comments down below if you think that I'm being illogical in any way here. Thanks.